I've not used StreamYard. I like it so far. I like the way it does its own lower thirds.
You got lots of different. Do you know what? To be honest, I haven't played around with it too much. You can probably do a lot more with it
These
than
things always
what
can.
I've discovered. But yeah, you've got the option for the guest as well as the host to stream on platforms, which is quite nice.
Oh, that's good.
So a guest can stream onto 6 different social media platforms. I can stream onto 6, and it just spreads the reach out as far and as wide as possible.
That's a really good idea.
So welcome, Dan. Sorry, you went to take a sip of tea there. Continue with your tea. Welcome to the BTS Creative Academy podcast. I appreciate you for joining me here today. Dan, you have many skills to your name, many tools to your trade. I found out about you that you're a video maker, a voice artist, sound designer, audio editor, content creator, many things. You wear many hats. Have I missed anything out that's important?
I honestly don't know. It's one of these things. It's every time. I think my career is really, in many ways, encapsulating what the progression of digital media has been over the years. That in many ways, it feels like I'm just every time you want to do one thing, you have to learn a new piece of technology in order to do that thing. Like when I was doing sound design, I had to do portfolio. So I had to learn how to make videos to show off the portfolio. Because with sound design, you can't just put out a load of sound effects and go, I made these. You have to see them in action with the footage. So you learn how video editing works and go, well, I can do that. And it comes up every so often. Oh, well, now I'm working on this. Let me edit your video for you. And before you know it, you're doing video editing, and all of that originally came out of wanting to do radio jingles. And so I was doing audio editing, which kind of led me into radio, which led me into content creation. And it's all sort of spiraled over the years. And each time, rather than fully transition from one to the other, I tend to just add another string to the bow.
Yes. Well, we'll get into that. We'll get into your journey. What I want to find out from you today, essentially, is where does the kind of like the performance side of Dan, the radio DJ, the voiceover artist, and the production stuff, where do the two come together? And I think we're kind of hitting on it already, that we're in a modern age where you have to wear many hats if you want to pursue your creative endeavor. I was only just before this conversation today, I've been working flat out all day on this podcast, and I was thinking to myself, I've done 10 people's jobs today.
Yeah.
I've done 10 different roles. Everything from the hosting the podcast, to editing the podcast, to the sound design of the podcast, to the artwork, to the marketing, and the list just goes on and on and on, to the managing, to the organization, to the producing. And you kind of stop for a minute and go, wow.
Yeah. And I feel like it's taken a very long time for larger media organizations to kind of cotton on to this idea. I remember in the early days of my content creation career, because they just saw all of it as this one thing under one umbrella, it never occurred to them that there should be multiple people working on this thing. I remember like the first time it really came up was when I was being asked to write articles as much as I was create videos. Because obviously in the early days there were a lot more people reading than watching. And where was I going with that? Damn it, I lost my train of thought there. Oh, that's right. We were talking the written content. Yeah, that's a proofreading. That was what it was. I would make, inevitably, as one does, spelling mistakes here and there, but it would only be the odd couple, what you'd expect, really, of people writing articles and trying to rush them out the door. And I would get harangued by managers for letting a spelling mistake be on our website on the internet. That's disgraceful. Well, all the people in the newspapers, they all get proofreaders. Why don't I? You're not supposed to make those kinds of mistakes.
Yes.
And I think it's taken a long time for people to have professionals turn around to them and say to them when they go, right, we need you to make a video. Well, okay, when you say make a video, it really isn't just a question of picking up your phone, hitting go and going, hi, subscribers, how are you? Welcome to the show, and then letting go, and that's your show. There's so much more that goes into it. And literally seconds before we went live, I was fiddling with the lighting here just to make it not look so grainy on screen and stuff like that. And those are all really normal things for creators to deal with. And suddenly you realize you've got to be an expert on lighting and an expert on sound and levels and all that kind of stuff, along with the technology for live streaming and all that kind of stuff. And we're only, I think, recently at the point where people have realized you need teams, not individuals.
Yes, and I think it's the new generation that has, social media has had a big impact on entertainment and the way that we consume and the way that we create and contribute to entertainment. And so the new generation that's it's always been there for them, the internet and social media, they're kind of easing their way into it. But for some of us older folks like us, we knew a world where it was very different to this, didn't we? We knew a world where entertainment and media was essentially something only the mainstream did. And so it's changed vastly, hasn't it?
And there was little to nothing in this kind of lower echelons before the internet. You were either in broadcasting or movies, or you weren't in it.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't really that opportunity to go, do you know what, I'm just going to go out and make what I want and put it out there and see what happens. The best you could do was hope to get it flogged by a seller in Camden Market on a VHS or whatever. So there's now a lot more opportunity, and not only opportunity, but because of that, the sort of, and this sounds like I'm complaining, but I'm really, really not. It's quite the reverse. The sort of quality bar has gone down for content, that people are willing to watch things that are of a lower technical quality because the people are compelling and the content's interesting. And I really like that we're in a world where it's much more about getting a good message across and delivering something that's entertaining than it is necessarily about having the biggest budgets and the biggest names.
Yes, and the technical aspect. I wonder if, because this is a new era of entertainment consumption, whether we're just seeing it phase into something new, where we're seeing it phase into something where the next generation after the one that's coming up now, they'll understand it all even better. For instance, I recently just sat down with my 10-year-old nephew, and he wants to be a content creator. This is a job role that he sees as a future for him. He would like to be in content creation.
And I don't blame him. It seems like one of the few that is actually on the up at the moment.
Yes, yeah.
I was at a games development conference not all of last week, but for most of last week, because it happens to be in Brighton where I am, so it's rather convenient. And it was interesting talking to people, finding out that, from my perspective, I've been trying to sort of build up my skills on YouTube and whatnot to eventually get a more serious job in the media industry. All the while, people I'm now hearing are coming from TV, and they don't know how to deal with this this modern framework for media creation, that they only understand it from the point of view of these individual silos. And they don't necessarily know how to work like a jack of all trades, or just being more flexible in the roles that you take on and how you work with people. I was dealing with people on a shoot fairly recently, and they came from TV, and it was fascinating because on the one hand, they had so much more information than I did about how to put together sort of a serious, weighty production. But at the same time, they didn't really understand how to handle like just one guy with a camera and doing a couple of shoots in a couple of days, and like maybe the lack of formality and the flexibility in production. They weren't really able to. They felt like every single role had to have a single individual person or an individual company doing that role, and it took them a while to get their heads around. Oh yeah. yeah, this guy is able to, as long as he's able to capture the audio at the same time. We don't need another guy to be handling the audio on top of that, and we don't need a different guy in the editing booth and another guy doing color grading, and yeah, another guy working on the sound. I say guy, person. In general, in this case, it did happen to be mostly guys, but that's just the way it is, unfortunately. But yeah.
And this takes me back to this thing that I was thinking about myself earlier, of these multiple roles that I was fulfilling today, these 10 completely separate roles. I was also thinking back at that time about when I reach a stage in the future where this becomes bigger and I am in a position where I would like to go to with this, with what I'm doing, I will understand how to manage those other roles around me a hell of a lot better than what I would have done had I not taken this all on myself.
Absolutely, yeah. Saying no notes.
Yeah.
I can't disagree.
Yes. So tell me, Dan, where did this all start for you? Did you start in a place of wanting to be involved in the production side of entertainment, or was it more the performance side with like the voice acting work?
Well, if we do our little Scooby Doo and go all the way back to the beginning, I suppose if we're truly honest, it started with wanting to be in a rock band as a teenager, and be doing exactly that and being keyboards and getting into music, and because of someone who was so in fact you could argue the very first thing was I remember at 9 years old going up to my parents and asking to play the keyboards, not the piano. Specifically, I wanted to play synthesizers and yeah, eventually get a guitar and play on stage. And I mean, and they did indeed get me a keyboard and a piano. They were very strict on like you have to also learn the piano, and I'm so glad they did that.
Really? Why?
Because I can still play the piano and I love playing. And so I'm glad they there's no way I would have had the discipline to learn to be properly musical without that side of it. But anyway, that took me into playing with bands, which took me into wanting to start producing music on my dad's PC at the time, and that led me to wanting to do music technology at university, and I ended up going to De Montfort. I actually, this is worth taking a slight sidetrack for. I actually completely ballsed my A levels. I got nil point. Well, technically an N and a U, and dropped the third one in maths, physics, and chemistry. So it's a near miss and an unclassified. But it was the first. This was pre-internet, really. Of like you could look at university websites, but clearing didn't happen online. It happened the old-fashioned way with the UCAS book, and then phoning up to try and bag an interview. And I didn't obviously get to my get into university on my A levels, so I decided. So I went through the UCAS book, found this one course, phoned the course leader at De Montfort, and they explained that it was the first ever year they ran the course, and it missed the original book, so all the places were going on clearing. And on that basis, he said, "It sounds like you've got a good idea of what you need to know for the course. If you can prove that in interview, I'll give you a place." So I remember I turned up. There were three of us in the interview room. For some reason, I was the only one who wore an actual suit. One of them was in a tracksuit, and that really blew my mind. And I turned up with literally a sack. There's blue IKEA sacks.
Yes, yeah.
I had one of those full of like what do you call it? Programs from events that I'd been in, listings for all the choirs and stuff. Basically, I failed my A levels because I spent most of my time in like the jazz band or the choir or the barbershop group or the theatre productions or whatever. It was always something in that world. And where was I going with that? A level. Oh yeah. So I turn up with that sack full of stuff. On the top of that is a tape with a tune I'd made a couple of days before on Cakewalk, which went on to become Sonar, which I think is still going today. And the whole interview was basically he picked up the tape, put it in the player, put some headphones on, went, "Well, clearly you've got what you need to do this course. Where would you like to live?" And that was basically my whole interview for university. And we get on the course, and without going into loads of detail, I discover student radio while I'm there, and it becomes my family for the next 2.5 years.
Now, before we
And
get
to
on
this day,
before we get onto the student radio, I think
yeah,
there's an important message there in failure, in that you did have a moment of that could have put a full stop on what you hoped and what you had for your dreams and your education. It could have been the end of your education, getting
yeah,
those
100%.
results from your A levels.
Yeah,
What
because
is it
I
you
may
think?
have been able to go to a production school, but I've no idea if I could have even afforded it.
So, what do you think drove you forward to continue with education at that point?
Parents not giving me an option otherwise,
Mhm,
and not wanting to disappoint them. Yeah, I'm making out like they were very strict. It wasn't that. It's more that that was the plan. That is what one does. I grew up in a typical northwest London middle class upbringing, and that was what you do. So there wasn't really an option to consider there. And I think in hindsight, in many ways, it may have been to my benefit to go to somewhere like SAE, the School of Audio Engineering, and learn proper audio engineering rather than a course that was just getting off the ground. But on the other hand, it led me down this totally different pathway.
mhm. So, what do you think others can learn from that then about that moment of failure and moving forward?
I think because time inevitably, inexorably moves forward, you will find something one way or another. There isn't really a true failure state. That life, for all that people say life is fleeting, life is a long slog with a lot of acts in it. Yeah, if you think who you are now, how different that is to who you were 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. These are all quite different people doing quite different things. And to imagine that all of it hinges on this one thing, and that was the one point. If you fail at that, you may as well run the credits. Your life is over. Is always perpetually garbage. That
Mhm.
cannot be true. It's simply now you're on a different pathway and you can do slightly different things. And it will always hurt. It will always hurt when you think back to the moment where it was probably within your control and you screwed up and now you didn't get the thing you always wanted. But then that will fade in time. You will move on from this.
And it's
And
amazing the path that it can lead you down if you
precisely.
keep moving forward. If you don't
Yeah.
give up and say this is a full stop. If you learn from it, and it may not feel like you can learn from it in the moment,
Yeah.
but if you keep moving forward, if you keep going in the direction that you want, it will be an important stepping stone to where you are now. Which that brings me on to your hospital. Sorry, your not
Well, I
hospital
did do
radio.
hospital radio,
You did
funnily enough,
hospital
but that's
radio as
almost like a
well.
side thing. Um,
University radio.
yeah.
You wouldn't have gone down that road necessarily, would you?
No, in fact, the course was really getting to me because it had now been a full semester and we hadn't done a single thing I didn't already know. And indeed had taken to a more advanced level at this point, just out of curiosity. It did get better in the end. By the third year, they did actually build a studio, and it was an amazing studio. It just took the first 2 years for that to not have that. And I was getting to the point where I said, right, I'm going to give myself a couple more weeks. And if at the end of those 2 weeks, I still don't feel like I'm getting anywhere, I'm done. And it was literally a day or two before. And I happened to see an ad in the student union right at the point where I was like, no, Joe, this is pointless. End of the weekend, I'm going to go back to London and take it from there. And I saw a sign that said, ever thought about being on the radio? Meet under the stairs at whatever time it was, because their office really was basically a large cupboard under the stairs. It was proper scrappy stuff. The actual studio was a porter cabin for the first couple of years.
Excellent.
And I turned up there, and literally by the end of that day, I was like, I'm staying. This is what I do now. And I knew I really, really wanted to be involved. And as I mulled over the next couple of days about what it was I wanted to do on the station, because I knew I didn't want to present. I don't have the, believe it or not, I often don't have the confidence to present, just turn on a mic and start talking. And so what I wanted to do was find another way I could get into it. And then I was like, those jingles, they're really cheesy. I wonder if I could start make a couple of demos of my own ones and see what they make of them. And I'd heard a couple of times on, I think it was either Virgin or XFM. Someone had taken, or it could have been Kiss actually, now I think about it. Someone had taken this idea of taking recent hits, tempo matching them. Bear in mind, we're talking about 1999. So it's not what like software just did beat matching. There was no such thing as DJ software at that point. So you're just doing the maths and trying to make things all fit in time. So you could have a solid, but then each song that's currently popular would play one after the other, each little bit of the chorus into a little jingle. And that was like, now you hear that all the time. It's one of the most standard ways of doing a jingle. At least it was. I haven't listened to radio for ages. But back then it was quite a novel thing. And I thought, well, I'll do one of those and a couple of others, and I'll bring them down to the station, see what they think. And if they like them, I'll go and spend some real time on them and do them properly. And within half an hour of me giving them the demos, they were using them on the air. And they said, right, that's it. You're now doing all our jingles for the entire station until you leave. And that is basically, yeah, that's what happened.
So tell me a little bit more about how that felt when you found your place, where you found this moment of fitting in. Because as you told me about that, I could see a huge grin come across your face as you were reminiscing. So how did that feel?
I mean, like I said, it was such a relief at the time, because I was basically about to quit on university and go and try and figure out something else to do with my life, and feel more alone than ever. And instead, and also because my course, I hadn't really gelled with anyone particularly yet. And it was not just finding something to do, it's finding people who I felt got me and I felt I got. And it felt effortless, I think, is the thing, is that suddenly I wasn't working to fit in. I was just being me, and people seemed to like that, which was rare for me. Certainly at secondary school.
That happens when you find your craft, doesn't it? Surprisingly, when you find your craft, when you find the thing that you do that you're naturally good at, that you enjoy, that doesn't feel like work, then all of a sudden you start to find your people, don't you?
I wonder if that's partly because when you do something that other people seem to think is good, and you're proud of, it makes you feel more confident about yourself. So you act in a more confident and outgoing and friendly way, and less guarded, and also less certainly in terms of the media world, less begging. It's one of the hardest things to do, is not feel like whenever you talk to someone who's in a position of power, not power over your career in a bad way, but like could give you a great leg up or something. It's really hard to have a conversation and not feel like you're going, please give me a job, please give me a job. And I think so, certainly with that aspect with student radio, we were very much all in this together. And particularly because, like I said, it had the whole scrappy student thing going on, that we were doing it out of a porter cabin. One night, literally hours before we were due on air, the aerial got struck by lightning. And we had to track down one from a local pirate radio station we knew. I don't want to know how that happened. I know that it wasn't an entirely legal thing. We ended up with a transmitter that went up within less than an hour of being due on air. And we finally get this thing up and get it up and running. And at some point so the way it worked back then, I don't know if it's the same now, you'd get a short-term license, and you get 2 4-week licenses per year. And that made it very easy to work around term time and frame it around work, because you were all building up for that 4-week period. So you could really, really lock in on that and not have to worry about keeping it going all the way, all the time. But they do have local inspectors who called up the station a few days after it had gone live to say, so just so you know, your signal in Leicester is currently more powerful than Radio 1. But on the other hand, it's good content and it's not interfering with anyone. So it's fine. Don't worry about it. We should fine you, but it's good quality content, so don't worry.
And isn't that also interesting as well? Once you start to find, you find your craft, you find your people, then you start to find an adventure as well, don't you?
So much. And these are people that several of which I'm still good friends with today. It really did become. I think it's possibly as well with university. It feels in some ways they're the first group of people that get to know the kind of adult you that you're most like going to be like in the future. Your teenage you is very much you're figuring it out you. But once you're sort of getting over that, getting into your 20s, and you're starting to act more like the grown up you're going to become, they're the kinds of friends you're more likely to hold on to for forever, because they know you in a way that your secondary school, God, too much time watching YouTube. Your secondary school friends don't know you in that way.
Yes, for sure. Like, yeah, at secondary school, I don't think I know anyone from secondary school now. There was that period of time when you're at secondary school, you're kind of just thrown into a place, into a building. The only common ground you probably have is your postcode.
Yeah.
And then you might be lucky if you find one or two other people that you get on with, that is a genuine bond outside of that place.
Yeah.
Where when you move forward in life and you start to find your things, you start to find your place, and you find your craft, you find your people, and you find your adventures, then it all starts to come together.
Yeah, I think I got particularly lucky with the student radio thing and the timing, because and I say that because several of the people that were in my tranche of that station are now very senior people in radio, and a lot of people are still involved in radio and broadcasting in some way. And I think it was also like what's the word, magic in a bottle at that particular time. And because I know a few other people that have been on the station that were younger than us and over the years have gone on to do other things, but there was something about that particular, and it's partly because I think it included the people who founded it. So my tranche came in about 1 or 2 years after the station got set up, but that meant there was a real excitement about it, including from the university, because it was this brand new thing that they hadn't really set out on for more than a couple of years. And I think as media, interest in radio has diminished and media has exploded in the way that it has, there's now less of a call for people to have to sort of go through a particular track at university to get into it. If you are going to get anywhere, you've probably already got your own channel and thousands of subscribers.
So at what point for you, so I'm guessing, so this sounds to me like this was at the end of the 90s, early 2000s?
Yeah, it was 98, 2001.
Yeah, so at this time, that's where the world started to change with technology and how everything
So
was
much.
But it was another 10 to maybe even 15 years after that, say, content creation became a
Yes.
thing. So at what stage for you did you see yourself shifting into this world of content creation?
I can be entirely specific and tell you 2005, tail end of, because that's when I got my first job in content creation. And I got it because I was trying to get into commercial radio jingle production. And I'd sent my demo off to a few people, including, I can't remember his name now, but whoever was the head of production at the time at what was then GCAP, is now Global Radio. And I got a message back saying it wasn't quite right for us, or it needs work. However, I've looked at the rest of your CV and everything. I actually think there's a role that could be really good for you, and put that my way. And it was a proper like line in the sand in my life, because not only was the job in content production, it also meant leaving London and setting up in Bristol, not knowing anyone. And so it was a bit like university in that way, in more ways than one. But it really felt like a new beginning at that point. And that was when I, jumped in the deep end and went, right, if I'm gonna do the content thing, I'm really gonna go at it. And so that job, to go back to what we were saying right at the beginning about wearing too many hats, it was all the content for all what were known as the network shows. So you probably know with Global Radio, particularly like when you go up and down the M4 and stuff, wherever you go, almost throughout the entire country, there is a heart radio station somewhere.
Yes,
they used to all have their own names, but they were still in 2005 part of the same network. And in the evening, to save money, all their shows ended up being broadcast from Bristol. They all took the same show and just broadcast it on their local station. And I was responsible for all the content for all the network shows online. And so that meant essentially running microsites within the main station site, like 5 of them at a time. So they've all got articles and competitions, and eventually we started doing a podcast for each one and clips, and then we got into like doing live videos and shoots from the acoustic session stuff. All this stuff for all these shows all had to be managed at once and created all by the same guy, and it didn't occur to anyone, including me, that that was not a good idea.
Tell me more. Why was that not a good idea then? Why?
It was way too much. You need specialists to if you want to do more than just tick all the boxes to say we've done this with content and that's what you should be doing at the moment. See, when someone goes, well, aren't you doing this? And you go, see, we are doing that. If you want to really excite your viewers, you need to give creatives an opportunity to work on a product and develop it and be creative.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why there was only, of the 5 different shows I was managing, one of them was the one that we were doing, the main one being broadcast from Bristol. That was the only one where I was really treated as a co-member of the team, rather than, oh, also the content guy making the articles for the website, but he's not really part of the team. That was the only one where I was in every daily briefing, and we really took the time to say, right, we've got this amazing platform. We've got national radio with a popular show with access to loads of celebrity pop artists. What can we do with that and the whole of the internet? And that was the one where we were able to start thinking like, getting there. They did have like a web development team. I could like assign them projects to make like flash games and stuff like that. And when we started getting into that realm where we could funny enough, now I mention it, once we started offloading work to other people and could get a team working on that and a company working on that competition and suddenly that could all come together, and we made these amazing things that people actually liked and engaged with, rather than just going, well, we should really be doing a podcast. Why don't we just take some greatest hits, make a clip show and put that out once a week? That's a podcast, isn't it? And it was fine. Didn't do badly. That was for a talk show called Late Night Love. Great show. Graham Torrington, you're amazing. I'm not being rude. But we were a bit lazy when it came to the podcast.
I guess it's not so much laziness as that it's the time that you've got as an individual to put this stuff together. So it's one thing as a solo entrepreneur, as a solo person trying to be a content creator, than a massive organization like Global doing it. And at that point, there needs to be where you are trying to reach the masses, where you are trying to do more with your content and build the content and give quality. You need to start collaborating and you need to start bringing others on board.
Absolutely. And I think they get that now. They've realized, there's money in their hills, and it's not just an add-on. And that's why they go absolutely all in on the content now, and they throw hundreds of thousands, if not millions, at it for their big podcasts and their digital content.
So what happened?
That sentence kind of trailed off there.
That's okay. We come to a natural conclusion on that point. So what happened for you next then? Where did you go? Where did you start to go take it into the world of sort of kind of self-employment, into a solo? Where did you go? Right, I'm done with kind of this working.
So that happened. We're skipping out quite a lot of steps and jumping.
Is there anything important that we're skipping out there?
Well, not really, because these were. I sort of decided that mistakenly, because I think this is more born of a lack of confidence than it was really about correctly analyzing the situation. But I'd come to the conclusion, well, I'm never going to sidestep into jingle and audio production. So I'm going to stay in the content thing because, that's what I should do. It's digital first and it's all great. So I'm going to stick with that. But I didn't want to stay with Global anymore. I wanted to get back to London because I was now at this point going out with my long-term friend, then girlfriend, now wife. So that was clearly the right decision. So I wanted to get a job back in London. And I ended up working for, which one was PPL, who are the music licensing people. If you've probably heard of PRS, but you've probably seen the PPL logo more than you realize. Whenever you go into a shop or other high street entity, you'll often see like a red sticker about yay big on the wall, and it will be like, we are licensed to play music, and the little PPL logo. I helped design that. But I think they've changed it now. which is probably a good thing. But anyway, worked there for a bit in music licensing, learned a lot about copyright, which is actually, this is not really much of a story, it's just a side thing. It's been so useful in the world of digital media to see how copyright works in the real world and why it exists the way that it does in the form of music and businesses, and the good and the bad of it. Because I mean, I left there partly out of a pseudo political opinion that they were kind of overreaching, because that they were acting more like I don't want to say government protest body, but more like, what's the word? Like a trade body than they were a licensing authority. They were starting to be more about, we need to stand up for musicians and their rights and the money they get, rather than being about, we want to make a fair world where businesses pay a fair amount and musicians get a fair amount back. So that was one of the reasons I left there. So it was useful training when going into the world of streaming and whatnot, and creating videos with content, and understanding how and why one navigates the copyright minefield that we live in.
So what advice would you give to anyone that from that knowledge that you have as a content creator going into this world? I see a lot of people making mistakes with how they use music. And there's a lot of automatic software that will flag that to people. But to avoid them mistakes, is there any advice that you would give to anyone?
I mean, to avoid the mistakes is just don't use copyrighted material that could get you flagged, even if you think you do have a reasonable case, because the easiest thing to do is just not get involved in the first place. Use stock content wherever possible, but that's not. I think part of the problem is it is a shit show, that we are in a huge mess when it comes to managing copyright online, partly because to the old school of the world of music copyright holders, it mostly benefits them to still wield the power and be able to dictate what music rights should cost. They are working on it. It is getting better. I've been reading about new licenses for DJs like me on Twitch, and other streaming platforms that will finally make it a lot easier to start playing copyrighted music. Because we all have said the same thing, that we all want to be able to pay a reasonable amount of money for what we do, which includes people like me who are just hobbyists and not making money. I completely get it. We should pay for music licensing, but it's unfair to expect we should pay exactly the same as, say, a 4,000 capacity club night or something, which is kind of how they're talking. And this is how they've talked for decades now, that they go, well, we can't easily license a streamer, because what if that streamer gets thousands of views, and now that's not fair on the creator? It's like, well, first of all, you can make it flexible. That is doable. You've been doing it with shops for the longest time now, and even so, you've got the ability to measure these things. Yeah, you can very easily base it on just, at the end of the month, it tots out how many viewing hours there were and charges and says, all right, this is the tier of license you're on. And most people will be happy to pay it, and those that don't won't play copyrighted music or will get copyright struck. That's the other thing. They have the tools. This is what really winds me up about copyright problems. The tools to fix it are already there. They're just using them to make it worse. Because every time there's a copyright infringement, rather than go, okay, well, just give us 100 quid and we'll shut up, and then we'll take that 100 quid and you keep paying every year. Or if you get, I don't know, 1 million views a video, okay, now that's 10 grand. Yeah, it goes. They can very easily figure this stuff out, and they know who's playing what. So I don't see why all they do is take all the money from the creators so they can't make more videos, or block their videos so they can't run a channel. Either way, the label loses out in the long run. So I don't understand. So I think there's a lot that will be changed, because it is now a big problem. When it got to the point where, like, creators were putting up videos and having their own record companies copyright strike them because the bots don't understand that actually is part of the same copyright. Things like that are getting to the point where it's now bothering the rights holders, and the record companies don't have the power they used to have. So thankfully, it will come to an end. Hold tight.
I guess that's where change will happen, when it's affecting the people with the big bucks, when it's affecting the people that are at the top, that want to stay at the top. That's when the change will come in. Whereas for the last few years, for the last 10 years, It's been just affecting the people that are trying to do something, that are trying to raise where their position is. At the moment, like you say, YouTube will just simply block your content if you've done something wrong, and any money that you've made through YouTube, you'll also get a block put on that.
Yeah,
And so
and they would, by the way, I think they would
moving.
make more money and save more money as well in admin
Mhm.
if they did, say, proportional. And again, this is the record companies swinging their proverbials around, that they have been able to hold YouTube down and say, right, well, we'll pull all our videos if you don't give us all the money whenever there's a copyright flag, instead of what it should be, which is, right, of this 1 hour video, you use 30 seconds of this song, which is 3.5 minutes long. So using our special algorithm that puts all these things into account, you will lose X% or X amount of revenue. And from then you get to keep the rest as normal.
I
And
guess
then, you know what, most creators would be fine with this.
I guess what's happening is the people in charge, or the original creator of a piece of music, are they trying to hold on to control? Because if it went the way you're suggesting, anyone can use any piece of music then, and
Mhm.
the original creator of that music has no say. They might not want it
That's
associated with their product.
Well, unfortunately, that is the law. They don't have the. They don't live. They honestly, that is the way it works. You do not have the right outside of politics, and
Mhm.
well, specifically political parties. Outside of political parties, anyone can use, as long as they've got, as long as they pay for the music rights. You can use any music for any purpose you like, and the original artist can complain, but they don't legally have a foothold, and that's a freedom of speech thing. As
Mhm.
annoying as it is when it works against you, um, it's part of freedom of speech for people to be able to use creative works, as long as they paid the license holder. They shouldn't be. You shouldn't be able to gatekeep music like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Once something is created, you know, you're right on the politics point as well. That yeah, you hear of that a lot. That music gets associated to a political party, and the artist doesn't like it.
And I think because in that instance, it's very easy to, and I think most people would make the assumption that, well, I'm hearing this song, that artist must be a fan of that party, so they must support that party. So now I know their political beliefs, even if they explicitly say we don't agree with this. And I totally understand and think it's right that that's the way things are. But
Mhm.
just because you hear a pithily chosen song in a drama that has nudity that you don't like, no one's thinking, well, they used that guy's song. That guy must like horrific horror porn. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it just isn't. That's not realistic for people to believe. And if that's the case, well, then it doesn't say anything about you. You're not in any way. What's the word? I don't want to say besmirched. That's a ridiculous word. Libel. It's not a libelous statement to play a piece of music that an artist says, I don't want this associated. You're not connecting them to it. You're just using it as a piece of background music.
Mm. And what about what I'm quite interested in this. So what about the rules where it comes to things reaching public domain? Is that still is it still the 70 years that
I,
you
I
have to?
believe so. I have lost track of it lately, and it's different in different mediums. Like there was the whole Mickey Mouse thing in 100 years.
Yes,
But
yeah.
I am a firm believer in things entering the public domain.
Mhm,
I think it's again, there comes, you have to get to you have to decide how reasonable is it that someone should continue to fund their entire life based on a piece of work they did, as you said, 70 odd years ago, at the cost of not allowing what are now 2-3 generations down the line, people who are 2 or 3 generations down the line, who've grown up with that being a part of just culture. Why is
mhm,
it unfair? Why is it fair to say you can't use that because I made this a long, long time ago and I demand that I get paid for using it? I think there comes a point where creative works deserve to be allowed to stay alive.
mhm.
And in fact, what's really been interesting is the ones who have gone after people, and this is less to do with, this is now going back to regular copyrights, but if you look at the difference between people like Metallica and the Beatles, who don't want their music being taken pirated, and they don't want their music being streamed online and all these kinds of things, and they make it harder, their listen numbers are going down. Whereas all the artists who have said, oh, by all means, keep playing our stuff, we want that. Okay, we're not being paid as much as we'd like in theory, but on the other hand, it's better than not getting paid, not being heard. The people who allow their music, those people are the ones who won't give permission for their samples to be used. That's right. And the ones who do, they stay relevant. Yeah, there's so many songs now using samples that where the sample, the whole point is it's a nostalgic hook. And that keeps the song relevant. Do you know what happens when you, 30 years after a song has been released, release a new song that samples that original song? More people listen to the original song, not fewer. Because that's the argument. If you put this out using my work and most of what your people are hearing is my work, you're taking away from people listening to the record I made. No, you're not. You're bringing in new fans. It's always been that way. And like the dance music industry has known this forever. It's something I didn't know till I was an adult, which is really annoying because I would have actually tried to release records as a kid. But like, so that the record companies did not care about white label DJ vinyls going around that sampled all their records, because we're dealing with numbers that are literally in the hundreds at best. On the other hand, those hundreds of vinyls being out there might well get played to thousands and tens of thousands of people who may well go absolutely nuts for it. At which point, you know you've got a hit on your hands. So I'm sure if you, as was the case, if the label then goes, so you know that sample you're using, right, we'd like to release that record for you and split the profits. You go, yes, I would love to do that. And then you've got a hit record. Or a dance label goes, you know that record you've made that has uncleared samples? Yeah. Well, we'd like to buy that off you and we'll clear the samples. And then everybody's happy. That's how you ended up with hit records. The only reason they got the samples cleared was because they broke it in the first place to get popular. And this is what I'm saying.
Are we in a time where business is stifling creativity? Business is putting a pause on creativity evolving and moving forward because it's trying to keep a handle on its ownership, because it's trying to, like you mentioned there about the copyrights with like Mickey Mouse, and they're trying to say that I think we've got about 8 years Superman becomes public domain.
Interesting.
But they're trying to say that Superman is not just a comic book, isn't just a cartoon series, isn't just a character. He is a brand. He is a business in himself. So the business of Superman won't be anymore if it becomes public. But if it becomes public, that's where the stories can take a new lease of life, where they can continue to evolve in a new direction.
I don't know, because if you look at what's happened with like Winnie the Pooh and stuff, actually not that much comes out of it. I think people realize with a lot of those older characters, it's great to be able to have access to them when you need them, but we don't need to create we can make new stories and new characters up. There are loads of great modern characters. You don't need to rehash the old ones. In fact, I would argue, controversial thought, there's never been a good Superman movie. If you forget that it's a comic book character that you used to love as a kid and just watch them just as films and forget that you know this character Superman, call it, I don't know, Mega Guy or something, and just imagine that it's not. So every time they say there have been great comic books, there have been fantastic cartoons, but it doesn't work as a film character.
I strongly disagree. I couldn't disagree more.
I feel he's that classic too powerful character.
Yeah, I get that's the problem filmmakers have faced with him. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
The problem that filmmakers have faced is that, and storytellers have faced, is a character needs struggle. A character needs something to overcome for it to be an interesting and enjoyable story. However, in the Christopher Reeve movie, the original Superman movie, I do believe the character was different, and growing up with that movie, I know that for newer generations, it's a harder watch because it doesn't stick with the pace and the tone of modern action
Yeah.
films. But as a character, he offered something different than what you'd seen in other stories. He offered hope. He offered um, a journey of inspiration, which you don't often get.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it wasn't sticking to the tropes of how a journey should go. And they tried to change that with the Henry Cavill modern films. They tried to make him more angry and more moody, and they tried to make him more troubled. But to me, that
That's what
completely
Batman's for.
exactly, that is
Yeah.
Batman. And I remember the filmmaker Zack Snyder, when he made Man of Steel, he actually said at a Comic-Con, "I would rather be making a Batman film."
Yeah. I can
And I was like,
believe
"You're the
that.
wrong. You're completely the wrong person to make Superman then."
I wonder if perhaps we were trying to make Superman films during some of I feel like we need to get to a more optimistic place in society before it will land again.
Yes, that's it exactly. It's but however, is it not these stories which move us into a more optimistic place?
It,
Is it not the
I'm
movie
going to
the
go with the
story?
economy first.
So to me, the Superman movie, the Christopher Reeve Superman movie, is one of my all-time favorite films. And yes, I watched it back with my young niece and nephew recently, and it is an old classic now.
What did they make of it?
They found it incredibly slow.
Yeah, and this is the
Bec-
thing, we didn't notice how pacey modern movies are, and I think even more so now that they have to compete with the Netflix era of binge watching. I was
yes,
talking about this the other day. One of the hardest things for cinema to keep up with is that they have at most 3 hours to sell you an entire story and have you really give a shit about the characters, which with TV that now has equal production budgets and equal quality style can do with the luxury of doing it over an entire season before it. Yeah, how many shows have people said, oh, you got to get past the first season, but then it gets really good. So
yes,
you've got literally, let's say, 10 hours to do character development.
yeah. I
And
think
so
that
it's
takes me
unfair almost.
to Breaking Bad. When Breaking
Yeah.
Bad came out, it was so slow on that first series, and everyone would say, "Watch Breaking Bad, but you've got to just push through the first season." But by the end of season 5, you cared so much about those characters because of that slow development,
Absolutely.
because of that time they took. And so,
And I
yeah,
think that's why. Sorry.
movies are in a hard place. They've got a hard and a difficult sell. And I guess that's why the movie theaters are one of the reasons why the cinemas are struggling.
But I also think that's been both why Marvel had its success and also what is now becoming its undoing.
Yes.
That exactly that they found a way to create ongoing story arcs and ongoing character developments, but still have self-contained movies, and especially through the original Avengers arcs, right?
Mm.
Yeah, up till Endgame. That the fever that people were in to find out what's going to happen and follow their characters, and people got so into it. But the inevitability of the capitalist machine that is Marvel, it had to do this. It got there was no way to not end up in this situation where you end up massively fragmented at a point where only the most dedicated of fan could possibly keep up with all the lore and all the different shows that
And
are going on.
and I would consider myself a dedicated fan.
Yeah,
I grew up reading only comic books. I'm dyslexic. I've struggled all my life with reading, and comic books were the only thing that I could engage with. And they
totally get
were
that.
they were also a place where that I found a lot of comfort as well.
Mm.
I felt a lot of empathy, and I recognized this is going to sound funny, but I recognized myself within a
No,
lot of
you were
the
supposed
characters.
to. Stan
Yeah,
Lee's talked about that often. That was the
yes,
whole that was the whole reason for Spider-Man existing, is
exactly.
that he
Yeah.
felt that all these heroes were big, grown-up adult men. and there was
All of
no
a
one
sudden,
that young people could
Spider-Man
identify
was,
with. Yeah.
yeah, Spider-Man all of a sudden was a school kid, and it
And
was
there
like,
you go. He's now one of the most successful, ongoing successes of the superhero franchises.
yeah.
The games are amazing as well, the new ones.
So and I guess, like you say, the problem with it is, I guess, with this storytelling, that yeah, Marvel did this great job of building up to a point where it had this massive finale, where it had all these slow building story arcs, and then it had it had two big massive films to conclude it.
Yeah.
Then it's, where do you go from there? And I guess the issue is they've brought in all the sub characters that were never really that interesting anyway. They were sub characters, and now the sub characters they're trying to make the mainstream.
Yeah.
You kind of, like you say, unless you are a real hardcore fan, it's too much. There's
Yeah.
too much going on. You can't absorb that much entertainment and understand where it all is.
And I think
Or,
that's why it was so successful at the beginning, was everyone felt like that. I remember having this discussion. People all felt like, "Oh, I'm a nerd. I watch all the Marvel films." No, that's normal. Everyone's watching all the Marvel
yes.
films. And so
Mhm.
everyone felt like they were part of the in crowd, and everyone could talk about it and have the same theories, but and fan ideas and everything. And it created that hub that you don't have in the same way anymore, because now you don't know if you know everything, and you don't know if the person you're talking to has watched everything or even cares anymore.
Yeah.
And that was always going to be the way it went. There's no real way of avoiding that. It can't be you can't perpetually expand without swallowing the earth. This is one of the problems, I think, with modern business in general, is the obsession with, when you only focus on growth, there comes a point where the maths doesn't make any sense. You can't grow any more than that, because you'd need to literally encompass the entire planet just with
Uh,
what you do in your business.
and I guess that takes us on to Disney. I guess that's what we're seeing with Disney, where Disney are owning everything.
Yeah.
Where Disney have taken over Marvel, they've taken over Star Wars, they've taken over every big licensed entertainment product.
Fox.
Fox,
Yeah.
yeah, and so everything now is becoming diluted. For instance, moving on to Star Wars, I have completely. I love the original three films. They
Yeah.
were very unique, and I have I like the prequels, and I liked the sequels, and there was a little bit of fun in the Mandalorian. But going past that, it is all diluted mush. It doesn't.
And
It
it really
doesn't add.
smells of it too, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it
It
doesn't
really
add
feels like
anything.
they're trying to push content at you, as opposed to we had this amazing idea we really want you to enjoy.
Yes, it's all, yeah, it's almost like just consume. And yes, you do give it a try because you think, oh, I did love it, and maybe there's something here. But I find myself, I can't even remember the name of the latest series, but I found myself turning
Is it
it off with,
Ashoka or something like that? Is that the one you mean?
yeah, the
Or is that an
Jedi.
animated one?
No, the Jedi one, where the Jedi are being hunted, and it's set 300 years in the past. And
I have no idea. I've missed that one entirely.
no,
I
I
know
think
there's
a
a
lot
new
of,
Star Wars Hunters thing, but that's a multiplayer game.
this is
So
it
it's not that.
exactly. We sound like two people that should know what we're talking about, and we don't. We
Oh,
haven't
get
got
me
a
on
clue.
Star Trek and we're fine.
See, and well, Star Trek, they seem to be well paced. I feel. I
Yeah.
feel.
And sorry.
Yeah, I feel Star Trek is slightly, yeah, doing slightly different. I'm a Star Trek. I grew up as a Star Trek fan as well, and while some of
Actually,
the
more.
stuff live long and prosper. As some of the stuff comes out, I don't enjoy all of it, and it doesn't
Yeah.
all suit me. I'm not a fan of Discovery,
No,
but I am a fan of Strange New Worlds.
me too.
I feel Strange New Worlds. I love how that's gone back to being episodic.
Yes, exactly. It does the same thing as the Orville managed to pull off.
Mhm.
Did you watch the Orville?
Do you know what? My brother keeps telling me to watch because my brother's a
The best
huge
Star
Star
Trek
Trek.
show that isn't part of Star Trek.
Yeah, he keeps saying exactly the same thing, but
Well,
it's
it was supposed to be, you know that?
no.
It was so Seth MacFarlane, creator of Family Guy and the Orville,
Mhm.
he pitched that because he's a huge he's been in he was in Enterprise. Don't know if
Yes.
you ever noticed that. He's got a
Yeah.
cameo in there. So massive fan. So he pitched them the idea for the Orville and they said no. So he went and did it anyway with most of the same people, which I find hilarious. But yeah, I think what's interesting as someone who spends way too much time on Star Trek forums, what's fascinating about as he was saying with the pacing, is that for everyone that says, "Oh, I hated the way Discovery worked. It's so not my kind of Trek," that I can find you another person saying that was the best thing they've done in such a long time. They finally, shook things up a bit and did things in a slightly different way. If everyone is complaining an equal amount, then you've probably done a good job. It's like the BBC
Mhm.
with BBC News. If everyone is complaining about how biased you are, then you're probably quite balanced. And that's
Interesting.
genuinely the viewpoint that people who work there take. It's that you will always get people telling you you're biased, but as long as you get a roughly equal number of people on all sides telling you that you're biased, you're probably about right.
And I guess so what they've done there with Discovery was try to reach a broader audience, try
Totally.
to reach out in a new direction and bring a new generation
The modern
of
binge
fans
watcher.
in. Where yeah, the modern binge watcher, but then they've also gone, "Oh, we've got our loyal fan base. They need something now. Therefore, Strange New Worlds."
But the one cretinous move I do not understand, to the point when it seems like not even the cast understand, is how they've cancelled Lower Decks, which is like the best thing they've done in years.
I wasn't aware that that's been cancelled. I do enjoy that.
Yeah, they're not bringing it back apparently for
Ah,
reasons of business. But like even like some of the not star the cast have spoken on Twitter and stuff like how they would X, how they would gladly return if given the opportunity.
I guess with some of these things now, I don't feel like we're in a space where there was a period of time when things came to an end. They came to an end.
Yeah.
Whereas now the reboots and the rebirths are so common, there isn't the
Yeah,
same
because I was
fear.
about to say like Quantum Leap and Sam never found his way home, and then remembered no, they did actually bring that back.
Yes, yeah. Now I wasn't a fan of that. I watched
The
that.
original or the
Oh
new
no,
one.
no, a huge fan of the original Quantum Leap.
See, I quite liked the new one.
Did you? Well,
Yeah.
I'll be honest. Like, I'm not going to review it because I watched the first episode, but it didn't feel right to me
I
because
get that. I
I
totally
have,
get that.
I have such a love for Quantum Leap. It is my nostalgia go-to feel-good program. If I think back to when I had COVID and I was laying on the sofa ill, and I just wanted something on the TV to make me feel a little bit better, I
Yeah.
chuck on a quantum. I get the DVD out of Quantum Leap and watch a few of my favorite episodes,
An
and it
excellent
just
choice.
takes me back to a happy place.
Still hate the ending though.
I don't know. I never hated it at the time.
Did
I
you not? Oh, even as a kid, that drove me nuts.
no, I kind of understood it. Where if they'd have, I don't know.
Well, I
Think that
believe from
I
what I
think
read
it got
online,
cancelled, didn't it? And it was a
yeah,
quick
they sort
decision.
of hastily had to throw that in at the end because they
Yes.
didn't know whether or not he'd get to carry on going.
Yeah, so it's kind of like open ended, but I kind of like that because it leaves you as the audience to make
Yeah,
some decisions as to the piece.
bit like what was in the briefcase in Pulp Fiction.
Exactly. It's another moment like that, isn't it? Where we as the audience get to make a decision.
Yeah, I like that.
Not everything has to be given to us in entertainment.
Yeah.
There is a space there for our own interpretations and our own discussions,
Yes.
and I help feel that that drives our own creativity.
Absolutely, and at the very least, it drives some very good, like round the pub table chats as well. It's a creative medium. There's always going to be more things to consume. If something leaves you with a moment of, "Ooh, I wonder what happened there." There's nothing wrong with that. as much as we all like a resolution.
Yes, of course. So talking of resolutions,
Yeah.
as we come to the end of this conversation, I wanted to know what your hopes and dreams were for the future of your journey with content creation and video making and voiceover artists. What do you hope the future looks like for you? Where are you going next?
That's a very good question. I think part of the, the problem with doing so many different things is you kind of want to take them all on and are often just open to new ideas and new projects to work on. That I think I'm really enjoying the groove that I found myself in. That was I was already working from home quite a long time before COVID, but that sort of helped grease those wheels with working with companies that this is now considered perfectly reasonable. I used to have to spend ages selling them on the idea, especially with like game audio and stuff like that. No, me sitting in your studio all day isn't helpful because I have to make noise. So that's going to either annoy everyone around me or I've got to live in headphones. And also not do as good a job because I've got noise all around me. So it actually helps me to be in the studio. And now the more I do with in my lifestyle and career choices, they all seem to lend themselves well to this kind of remote working system. So I'm very much enjoying that side of it. But where do I? It's difficult. Like I said, I like working with all kinds of people in all kinds of ways. So knowing where I want to go next, I just enjoy. I think it's the video editing side still feels relatively, even though I've been doing it a good 3-4 years now, still feels relatively new. Possibly because so much seems to change so much. I mean, we never even got into talking about things like the modern AI tools and how they'll affect the world and stuff like that. So I think there's going to be a lot of change around the creative industries over the next few years.
Give me something
And
that you feel then that will change in the industry. What do you feel like? We've all been talking about AI the last 18 months, 2 years. It's been the big topic of every creator's conversation or every industry's conversation.
well, I
How do
think,
you see
sorry.
that moving forward?
First of all, I think the term AI is going to slowly and gradually become more and more cringe to the point where people don't want to use it anymore. Like no one calls anything an I anything to sound technologically forward.
Yes,
Except the iPhone.
I guess it's that it's the equivalent to the World Wide Web.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. And I think the by extension, not just the term, but I think the way we think about what right now it's the bright new shiny, and everyone's still trying to bolt it onto things in whether it works or not. And most of those things will fade away because they're useless and just barriers to doing what you're trying to do. Part of the problem, particularly in creative work, is that AI will give you everything as a finished result or nothing whatsoever. And if you want to make changes, it's really hard to make the kinds of adjustments that a skilled professional wants to make. So I think it'll be more about AI integrations that help you and assist you do the thing you want to do. It's as has been going around the web lately. I didn't. When we were talking about AI, the whole point of it was meant to do the dishes while I go off and write poetry, not the other way around. And I think we're slowly getting to that point where the its use as an assistant rather than people are learning that it's not as good as a novel as a novel creator as people would like to think that it is. Once you start learning, not even learning, just being exposed to the content and the patterns that you get used to. Like, how quickly did you get used to the robot voices that you were absolutely convinced were a real person the first time you heard them?
Yes, yeah.
Now you can tell the moment you go onto one of those TikToks or YouTube shorts and you have that very overly human robot voice, and you
Even
just
when
know.
they've used a voice that's I'm thinking to one I saw earlier today, it was Donald Trump's voice.
Yeah,
I just instantly knew it wasn't. Maybe some people would still get fooled by that. Maybe some people would, but I think the majority can sense
yeah,
it. There's a sense,
exactly.
isn't there? There's a sense
And
that
and for
we know.
kids now, that's gonna be something that's just part of who they are. They just get it.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think therefore, a lot of that stuff, the dross, what's the word? Slop, AI slop. That's the official term, I believe now. That's the equivalent of email spam. You get AI slop, and we know exactly what we mean by that without having to go into the details. And I think that will start to die away more and more because people are so sensitive to it already now. Like, people complain when you use AI artwork that looks obviously AI generated, even if 10 years ago you'd go, that's a really cool picture.
Mm,
People want to know there was a human skill in what they're doing. So I've been to a few gigs the last couple of weeks, and the discussion of AI generated music has come up more than once. And I was saying, like, we are stood here not because we want to hear the music really loudly, but because we want to see these people who made this thing make this sound for us, in front of us, in real time. We want to see their faces when they do it. We want to be part of that experience, and that will never go away. That's part of being a human. So I don't think the creative the creative work that is for creative purposes will ever go away. People want to make stuff, and people want to watch what other people have made. Yeah, people are more can be incredibly impressed by something a kid does that wouldn't be impressive if an adult did it. You still feel that sense of being impressed by it
mm.
because of what made it, not because of what's been made.
What an interesting moment in history that
Oh yeah,
we're alive in. A moment where we're questioning that. A moment where we're getting to understand what it is about creativity and what it is about the art form that we love and enjoy. There hasn't been a moment before in history where we've had that option to look at it
no,
subjectively, have we? We haven't had a moment where we can look at, what if it's made artificial? Would we still enjoy it in the same way? And I think
and I
we're
think
seeing very early on in this that we don't. That
no.
there is something missing that maybe we don't know how to put into words. But there is something missing.
And when it gets to the point where it's no longer missing, that's because the tools will have developed enough that the human can be put back into that equation. So, like, if you take this auto-generated music, for example, if instead of what it does now, it just works out how to make that sound, it can then reverse engineer that and give you the template. Or you can say, right, so you know how that synth, that synth then that goes da 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 da, can we make it go da 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 da? And it can just go in and do that. When you can talk to it and have that Star Trek like interaction where it's actually allowing you to take the images that are in here and better make them happen out there. When we
Yeah.
get to that point, I think then it will become more useful again. But right now we're in that growing period where it's taking what's in here and doing a better representation than we can do with our hands immediately, but not an overall better representation than a human given enough time.
One area that I've found a massive use for AI that's helped me and helped me understand the benefits of it is with writing. As I mentioned before,
Mm,
being dyslexic, um, I struggle a lot with my writing. I struggle to. Uh, I've done a lot of writing over the years, still, oddly enough. Um, but I struggle with sometimes putting the writing together in a way that someone else will understand.
yeah, and isn't it
and,
annoying because I suffer the same thing because you read it and you're like, how could anyone not understand this? How much
and
clearer could I possibly be?
exactly. And I think the thing is, yeah, that's the way that the dyslexic mind works. It works in a different pattern to how it's being received. And
Yeah,
I've used AI for an example in helping me write some social media posts. I know the message that I want to get across, and I
yeah,
use that tool to format that message in a way that others will understand. Whereas
totally.
whereas 5, 6, 7 years ago, I wouldn't have been putting social media posts out because there would be a barrier. There
Yeah,
would be my own learning difficulty. I don't want to say I nearly said disabilities then. Difficult.
difficulty.
Yeah,
Yeah,
my own difficulty, my own barrier that I couldn't overcome. Whereas now I have a tool that allows me to outreach with my ideas.
yeah, I've used it in exactly the same way. There was a while. after one job, but before getting back into the freelancing thing, so it's about 18 months ago, I wanted to start doing a few bits on YouTube just as to keep my hand in the game. Realize how difficult it is to keep up with client work and make compelling videos for yourself that don't make any money. Excuse me. And yeah, so I was using the way I was using ChatGPT. I knew I wanted to make shorts, and I'd find the article that I was that I want not the article, the articles in the research that I was putting together for the piece that I was making. So I should say it was news driven. And so I was getting 2 or 3 articles, getting ChatGPT to summarize them, to get it down to the rough size that I want it to be. The final script bears little to no resemblance to the thing that ChatGPT got out. But there's no way I was able to sort of coalesce the data of all these different things that I was reading to try and make a story and make the first cohesive draft. I could not get that to work. But if I had the machine that I could offload that to, and it could give me, here's your terrible first draft, I could then go through it and actually put like humor and sense into it and pick out the parts where it was giving a good go, but it was using a lot of overused tropes, as it will often do. One of the biggest problems, as we know, is the results you get depend on the language model. I should point out we're talking purely about generative AI, that side of AI, which is very different from other things, which I do find very useful, like AI image enhancement and video enhancement.
What do you
That
find?
has saved my bacon on a number of occasions.
Yeah,
There is
a time, doesn't it? It saves you that some of the tasks, I guess, that it's taking away were just processing tasks.
Precisely, and those aren't real jobs.
They weren't skill-based tasks. They were tasks that you could train a chimpanzee to do it.
Yeah,
but it would take time. And
but even then, it's more like it's the commodity aspect of it that there is a specific start point and a specific end point that this is done, and it doesn't require the additional creative thinking. And those are the jobs that I think most people don't actually want.
And I
but
guess
that's a whole different discussion.
I guess that brings us back to that thing of this moment in history. We're getting to choose, what do we want to do?
Yeah.
We are actually saying we want to do the creative thing. We want to do the poetry. We want to do the video editing.
Yeah.
But we don't want to do the organization. We need it, or we have an area where we're not so good at that we want some help.
It's like I say to every DJ, the old fart DJ like me, but actually an old fart, who still says, like, is desperately clinging onto vinyl and not using the digital tools available to you, like the infamous sync button that takes your 2 tracks and locks the tempo onto a grid, so that when you press the play button, even if you're a little one side or the other of where you should hit it, it will automatically lock in. All that does is offset a little bit of process work that I need to be doing, which is but it's just a process. There's nothing creative about lining the beats up so they're in time. That's just a mechanical thing you need to do to make mixing work. So offsetting that to a button means I can now focus on adding more effects, or what songs I'm going to play next, or maybe throwing in samples and stuff. And you can see this borne out in the new DJs. The DJs of today, all of the old farts were saying, oh, they're so lazy, they don't even bother. Just press one button, they don't even mix anymore. They will put those old DJs to shame with the amount of skill that they show, because they're thinking in broader terms, because they offset some of the more complicated thinking to the machine so they can do the creative bit, which is the bit everyone wants to be doing.
Yes. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, Dan.
It has.
I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed speaking to you today.
Likewise.
So, final question for you then.
Yes.
Have you got any words of wisdom that you would offer yourself if you was to go back in time at the beginning of your creative journey? If you was to go back to yourself at that moment of, let's go back to that moment that we started with, that moment of you'd finished your A levels and you'd failed, and it all some things had gone wrong. What advice, having been on this journey now, would you give to yourself?
I kind of would like to request that we jump to something further ahead where I was already into my career a little bit.
Let's
Because
do
that
it.
one, there's very specific. I think I would have said,
You're
don't
in
worry about
control.
university. You don't need it. University is a waste of your time. Go do the audio engineering school. Trust me, it's a better choice. That's what I would have said, but that's not helpful. I think for me, the thing I would have said most of all when trying to get work in general, and it's still something I suffer with today, is you you think everyone is better than they probably are. That most of the jobs I haven't got, I've not got because I haven't gone for them, because I've assumed I couldn't possibly get that. There must be a million people so much more qualified than me. And all the time when I speak to people years later about these things, they go, oh God, no, we either we would have hired you, or you know, oh God, no. The thing I hear all the time is you see on LinkedIn all these CVs, like 100 people have applied to this job. Most of them are garbage and the rest of them are bots. It turns out you're probably a lot better at what you do than you think you are. No one else, the best advice I ever got on this was no one knows what you were intending to do, just the thing that you did. And this applies to music, it applies to DJing, it applies to everything, especially in the creative world. People assume that you were doing it intentionally. So you don't need to worry about covering up your mistakes, because as far as everyone else is concerned, they're not a mistake. So just lean into it. And you're probably better than you think you are. So go for it. Don't be afraid to go for it. The worst that can happen is you carry on doing what you're already doing.
Nice. What a lovely message to end this on. Well, thank you, Dan. Now, if anyone is wanting to find out a bit more about you and look into the things that you're doing, maybe hire you as a video creator, where do they get in touch with you?
I have my very own website of danmellins.com. That's DANMELLINS.com. That's where you'll find all the stuffs.
And if anyone has been watching or listening, we appreciate you for joining us on this journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching. It's been really good fun. And thank you so much for hosting. It's been really interesting talking to you and diving into everything.
And you. Appreciate it, Dan. Thank you.